If you were to wake up and find yourself staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, you might think you'd ended up in some kind of an alternate reality or a fantasy world, right? That wasn't the case for me. I woke up in a shabby, old motel room that smelled of mold and groaned as I felt a splitting pain shoot through my head. I could barely lift myself out of bed, and as I clutched at my forehead and got up, the musty sheets around me fell to the floor. Okay, so let's see. If I remember correctly, I drank myself to sleep after finding out I had failed the exam, yet again. Does that mean I crawled all the way to this motel from my apartment? Have I gone nuts? Cursing myself, I stumbled to the bathroom to take a leak and check how scruffy I looked in the mirror. Expecting to see the guy who was studying for the civil service exam and had gotten wasted the night before, I fell to my knees in shock when I actually saw my reflection. Arg, what the F***ck? I exclaimed, biting my lip in disbelief. This could not be happening. I brushed the dust from my hair with shaking hands and peered into the mirror again. What I saw was a complete stranger, a thin, pretty, young boy staring back at me. I tried taking deep breaths to get my rising panic under control. At that moment, I desperately wished to take up smoking again, even though I had quit some time ago. I breathed, realizing that even my voice sounded strange. I felt like I was in danger of biting right through my tongue. What on earth was going on? Struggling to get a grasp on reality, I used the stranger's body to stagger back to the bedroom. A quick search of the room revealed what looked like a suicide note and an empty prescription bottle. Whoever had occupied this room must have tried to end their life using sleeping pills. I skimmed through the note to learn that the owner of this body was an orphan. He had dropped out of school and decided to take his own life because his burdens had become too much for him to bear. Reading it left me feeling a little melancholy because, despite switching bodies with someone, I'd somehow found myself an orphan again. I noticed a wallet on top of the tacky vanity table, and after rifling through it, I discovered a couple of bills and an ID card. Park Moonday 0x1215-3XXXXXX. This guy was born in the 2000s. At least I was younger now. Sighing softly, I studied the ID card. The boy in the photo looked healthier in the picture than the one I'd seen staring back at me in the mirror, but he still had a gloomy air about him. Despite this, he looked young and was fairly attractive. Based on his picture, I thought he looked younger than 23 years of age as indicated on his ID, but I didn't have time to think about that. I struggled desperately to examine my situation objectively. After a few deep breaths, I managed to compose myself and came to the conclusion that I needed to start looking for my real body. After I found it, I could worry about what to do next. After all, there is every possibility that Park Moonday had ended up in my body. Grabbing the wallet, I shoved the door open and immediately froze. Looking out the window in front of me, I saw that it was snowing, but it had definitely been July when I'd gotten wasted last night. Oh, my God. I gulped, hurrying back inside the motel room and going to the calendar that was sitting on the desk. December 2002. My head spun. The calendar was from 3 years ago. It didn't take long for me to regain my composure though. After all, swapping bodies with someone else was way more shocking than time traveling to the past. Sighing, I sat on the edge of the bed. I couldn't even remember any winning lottery numbers, so why did something like this happen to me of all people? Suddenly, I became aware of the utter nonsense my brain was cooking up and my head shot upright. What if it turns out that this isn't actually the past? What if I was in a totally different reality? I knew it was a crazy idea, but it sounded possible, especially considering how unreal this whole situation was. Besides, these kinds of things frequently happened in some of the webtoons and web novels I used to read. What was it called again? An action-adventure genre? I bet I looked ludicrous in that moment, softly muttering to myself in a daze. Okay, status window. Of course, nothing happened. *T. I punched the bed with both fists, embarrassed. I couldn't believe I actually thought anything would pop up. I was such an idiot. Name, Park Moonday, Ryu Gunwoo, Level, 0 title, none singing, C dancing, physical attractiveness, C charm, trait, infinite potential. I was so startled that it actually worked that I toppled from the bed. Even as I groaned in pain, I thought to myself, this isn't what I expected to see when I asked for a status window. Eyes glued to the status window hovering before me, I was finally able to reach a state of calm. After concluding that I was experiencing something supernatural, it became obvious that this wasn't just a practical joke. I left the motel and made my way to a nearby internet cafe. I wanted to see what differences I could find between the world I'd come from and the one I currently found myself in since I'd traveled 3 years into the past. Just to be sure, I asked to use the phone behind the internet cafe counter and dialed my cell. The AI operator informed me the number didn't exist. I wasn't able to log into my university account, and even the social media account that I'd needed to make for a school assignment was gone. In other words, all evidence pointed to one thing: I had never existed in this world, and honestly, I wasn't all that disappointed about it. My parents had passed away in an accident when I was in middle school, and I'd lost touch with my other relatives after I started attending university. It wasn't like I had a lot of friends either. I grew distant from the few that I did have during the period that I'd spent constantly failing the civil servant exam. Thinking about all the years I wasted on that exam made me grateful that I had been given the chance to say goodbye to that life. "Here's the ham ramen you ordered," the cafe worker said as they brought out my food. "Oh, thanks." Now that I was done evaluating my new life, I could finally eat something. As I gobbled down my ramen, I pulled up a search engine on the computer. If I was 3 years in the past, that's when I had arrogantly decided to study for real. I had even canceled my cell phone and internet plans, so the search results on screen weren't familiar to me. But that didn't mean things looked entirely unfamiliar either. Everything just looked exactly as it had 3 years ago. I recognized many things that were trendy back then: different games, movies, songs, and idols. Idols, huh? I placed my chopsticks in my now empty bowl and crossed my arms, contemplating. No matter what angle I came at it, the status window from earlier could only be meant for an idol group member. I still had no idea how I'd found myself in this situation, but surely it had something to do with that status window. Did Park Moon-dae, the owner of this body, make a dying wish to become an idol trainee? Or is it because of the way I'd spent my days as an undergraduate student? I had absolutely no clue. Still, I needed to use every tool I had at my disposal. Status window. I whispered the word so softly that even the person sitting next to me would only think I had sighed. The status window emerged from nothing before my eyes, just like it had earlier. My singing was C grade, as was my physical attractiveness. The rest of the categories were blank, possibly because I hadn't tried any of them yet. Several theories came to mind, but I decided to put a pin on them for now. There was no way I was up for trying out my dancing skills or charm right now. I turned my attention to the rest of the categories in the status window, and it suddenly occurred to me that I'd seen a noribang on my way to the internet cafe. Oh, nice. I'd gathered so far that C grade was actually not bad. In fact, I thought my singing was pretty good. My vocal tone was steady, and I had a rich-sounding voice. I vocalized clearly as well. In other words, I had the basics down. It seemed that I might actually be a gifted singer. More shocking than my newfound abilities was the window that popped up. Mission accomplished. First attempt, level 011 point acquired. Mission. Even as I read the words, another window was already appearing. Missions in progress. 10 attempts, 0/10, 100 attempts, 0/100, first experience, 0/1, 10 experiences, 0/10. I tried scrolling down, but the list was endless. No doubt the quests were meant to encourage skill grinding. Alarmingly, the more I scrolled, the more the quest completion units increased exponentially. Almost half of them were just blank spaces indicating that they would remain a mystery until a later time. The list immediately sapped me of all motivation, and I closed the window. Since I'd earned a point, I might as well try using it as I normally would in a game. I called up the status window and noticed new text had appeared at the bottom which read, "Remaining points. 1. Transfer 1 point to singing." As soon as those words left my lips, the information on the status window changed. Name: Park Moon-dae, Ryu Gunwoo. Level: 1 title, none singing, C+ dancing, physical attractiveness, C charm, trait, infinite potential. My singing grade immediately changed to C+. Had that seriously worked? I selected the same song I had been singing earlier and sang it once more, exactly as I had before. Wow, that was pretty good. I could definitely hear the difference. My singing sounded smoother and more well-balanced. It was as if my muscles had automatically formed memories and instinctively knew how to make my singing better. My gaze fell to the trait category on the status window. Infinite potential. Normally, people are naturally gifted in some areas and have to work hard to build their skills in others. Sometimes one could only improve so much even with hard work. In other words, there's usually a limit to one's potential and growth. Judging by the status window, I was able to improve ridiculously fast relative to the amount of effort I put in, and there was no limit to how much I could level up my abilities. I had also successfully confirmed that applying a skill point to an ability caused significant improvement. Stroking my chin contemplatively, I thought to myself, an idol, is that what I'm supposed to use this new body to become? At that moment, a pop-up emerged on top of the status window. Alert! Status abnormality. Debut or die. There were several more rows of flashing red letters. You will die unless you debut as an idol within the set time frame. Days remaining. D. 365. What the? It sounded completely beyond belief, but a rising sense of foreboding washed over me. Entering someone else's body was already bizarre on its own, so it wasn't entirely impossible that crazier scenarios might lie ahead of me. The strange pop-up vanished as soon as I finished reading it, and sure enough, a new category had been added to the status window. Name: Park Moon-dae, Ryu Gun-woo. Level: 1. Title: None singing, C+ dancing. Physical attractiveness, C. Charm. Trait: Infinite potential. Status abnormality. Debut or die. Is this for real? F***ck. Clutching my head, I swore under my breath and felt myself breaking out in a cold sweat. I had already confirmed that the status window was functional and accurate. The possibility of this **TTY status abnormality being realized couldn't be ignored. Why the hell was something so insane popping up out of nowhere? Was it because I thought about becoming an idol? I laughed in disbelief. Yet at the same time, I thought to myself, is it possible that I'm being punished for selling all those photos? That's right, photos of idols. To be frank, it was a field of work I was familiar with because I'd earned a pretty penny as an undergrad student taking pictures of idols and selling them to their fans. In the process, I did some things only someone who was completely desperate for money would do. I'd seen all sorts of ridiculous **T and heard all kinds of rumors. It's true that your environment shapes who you are. I'd taken so many photos of idols that there was a time I was completely obsessed with the idol industry. In those days, I'd even voluntarily done research into various aspects of the field, which is why I was pretty well versed in everything idol related. I wiped the cold sweat from my face and crossed my arms again, glaring at the status window in front of me. I didn't know what the hell was going on. It all seemed ridiculous, and I was pissed off. But since I didn't intend to die, I needed to get it together. That's right. My previous life was already a thing of the past. Why not take this opportunity to start a new life, especially when the situation was ripe for the picking? Besides, if I wanted to find out how I ended up in this body, I needed to make use of the bizarre status window and find the answers for myself. With that, I was done considering my next course of action. I chuckled to myself, feeling a little like I had lost my mind. Thinking about it though, hadn't there been an idol survival audition show that went viral around this time? Idol Incorporated. That was the name of the survival audition show that had gone viral around this time. This particular audition show recruited hundreds of idol trainees and then went on to disqualify them using a voting system. It became so popular that a great number of TV shows ended up copying its general format. Idol Incorporated was just one of many audition shows produced at this time. But the reason why this one in particular was such a huge hit was that it was much more brutally capitalist in its approach. Nowhere was this more obvious than if you examined the promotional slogan used in the first season: invest in your idol's future. This meant that your vote carried more weight depending on how much money you spent on stocks. And it turned out that season 3 of the show was set to air later this year. For a variety of reasons, season 2 was a huge failure, so the producers decided to pretend like it never happened and came back with a new season, subtitled Relist. Unsurprisingly, the general public regarded going forward with the third season as completely ridiculous and thought it doomed to failure. What did I think about it at the time? The answer is I hadn't been thinking about it at all since I was too busy studying for the exam. Contrary to everyone's expectations, Season 3 turned out to be an unprecedented hit. Even though there was tremendous controversy surrounding the show, as well as unending criticism, Idol Incorporated created a huge buzz and secured top viewer ratings. In fact, the winning idol group charted on music charts with 80,000 streams and sold over 600,000 copies of their album in just the first week. This was exactly why I wanted to compete on the show. Today, I was taking the first step toward that goal: getting a haircut. You're all set. I didn't cut too much off the sides, just like you requested. Yes, thank you. My hairstyle finally suits my face, I thought to myself, examining my neatly trimmed hair in the mirror. Maybe it's because I'd slept and eaten well for the past few days, but I looked less haggard and miserable than I had before. The combination of all these things meant I looked presentable even after cutting my thick bangs shorter to reveal my forehead. To my great satisfaction, the lady who was getting her hair permed in the chair next to mine was showering me with compliments. "Oh, my, that haircut looks amazing on you. You look so charming now." I thanked her and went to the counter to pay using cash. When I checked Park Mundi's bank account, I was happy to discover he had quite a lot of money. The account history told me that it was insurance money inherited from his parents, which is probably why he hadn't used it. Honestly, I felt bad for using it myself. When I receive my first paycheck, I'll return the money I used and donate some to the Child Welfare Agency. Still, I felt a little sad. I'd learned more about Park Moonday after obtaining a certified copy of his family registry and a new phone plan. The original Moonday hadn't taken his life on a whim. He'd moved out of his apartment and cancelled his phone plan beforehand. It seemed as if he had barely received any of his housing deposit back because he hadn't paid rent for several months. He died on his own birthday. Moonday must have really wanted to put an end to everything. Not that I don't understand how he felt. I felt the same way at one point. I hope you're in a better place now. I paused and allowed myself a brief moment's silence, remembering him. When the moment passed, I pushed the salon door open and stepped outside. It was close to noon, and I squinted my eyes against the bright sunlight. There were still a lot of things that I wanted to get done today. First, I need to come up with a real plan. I already knew all of the show's special missions, as well as the members who would successfully debut, and the theme song. Of course, I didn't remember all the minor details since I'd been busy preparing for the exam, but I had to work with what I had. This show was so influential that as long as you were able to pass the second stage, you were guaranteed to secure a contract with at least a small entertainment agency. However, my plan had one huge problem. Open recruitment for the new season had already ended. Luckily for me, I had a useful tidbit of information at my disposal and intended to use it to my advantage as best I could. My goal was to become a contestant on the show, even though it had already closed its open auditions within the past week. I also planned to be cast not at the broadcasting station, but at a noribang in the same neighborhood. Idol Incorporated? Oh, you mean Idol Incorporated. I heard one of the writers is a complete nutcase. That was the *T some guy in my photography club had loudly declared, snickering to himself during one of our after-parties. He had claimed to have heard it from a relative who worked at a broadcasting station. Personally, I wasn't very fond of him since he was one of those guys who enjoyed gossiping and spreading rumors. Apparently, this crazy writer has been recruiting contestants from places like noribangs. Where was it again? You know, the neighborhood the broadcasting station's located in. Oh yeah, Song District. I heard she went around to the noribangs in that area and recruited random people. And eventually, she was busted for it by the producer. I mean, that's pretty ballsy of her, right? She's a nobody but still caused all that trouble. Sounds like a complete psycho, huh? The guy had continued prattling away with entirely too much passion about how the show recruited contestants. It's common for people to talk *T when they're drunk, but he was the only person I'd ever known to incessantly talk about something so boring at a party with peers. Who the hell invited this asshole? Let's not invite him again. I second that. It was pretty obvious to me that was what the club members had been thinking based on their sour expressions. It goes without saying that I believed none of his *T. I was just focused on enjoying the free booze. Yet surprisingly, someone chimed in to support his claims. Lee Goyun was recruited that way. Come again? Lee Goyun was one of the most recognizable female idols to debut from the first season. She had gained huge popularity thanks to her innocent appearance, charming dialect, and cheerful, eccentric personality. The people around me had reacted enthusiastically to this new information. Wow, wasn't she one of the contestants who actually debuted? Yeah. Whoa, how did you know that? The classmate who majored in media communications had replied calmly. That psycho you were talking about earlier is my older sister. The guy who'd been gossiping suddenly stammered, as everyone glared scornfully at him. Oh, that's not what I meant. You got something wrong, though. She wasn't busted by the producer. He gave her a raise. The guy didn't say a single word after that. Thanks to the classmate who had shut him down so soundly, everyone else was able to enjoy their alcohol in peace. I had sipped my drink, listening as she recounted her version of how the recruitment process worked. Her story was quite entertaining, and so I'd remembered it after all these years. Apparently, the production team was faced with a dilemma. They were unable to recruit enough contestants that fit the criteria of the show. Hence, a week after auditions had already closed, they searched the nearby Noribangs to fill their quota. Isn't it better to find kids there though? I think they'd be easier to recruit, one of the club members had said. Actually, I heard the Noribangs around the broadcasting studios are mostly filled with trainees who go there to practice. In any case, they were trying to recruit non-trainees because they needed someone fresh who didn't give off the vibe that they'd already worked in the industry for a long time. In other words, what they needed wasn't a contestant who was good enough to potentially debut, but an ordinary person who knew nothing and would therefore add some spice to the show. After all, these days agencies went to great lengths teaching their idle trainees to be careful what they said. It'd be unlikely that an experienced trainee would create any drama. This essentially meant that the non-trainee contestant the production team was looking for would be used as cannon fodder to make the show more entertaining. That's not important to me right now, though. What was important was there was a good chance the writer I'd heard about would use the same method she'd used previously to recruit for season 3. Since it worked the first time, it made sense she'd use the strategy again. Plus, since the second had been a complete failure, the contestants willing to audition were likely of a much lower standard. The production team was probably feeling pretty desperate by now. I had to think about this logically. Park Moon-dae was a little scrawny but was pretty good-looking, tall, and he sang well. So as long as I created an opportunity for the writer to see and hear me sing, there was a good chance she'd invite me to join as a contestant. Besides, I have to level up. It was imperative that I raised my stats by completing the practice missions. I'd have to be exceptional in some way if I wanted the writer to consider me as a potential candidate. Grabbing the mic, I chose a song and glanced at the door of the private room I was in. It was made of glass. The layout was probably designed to give off a bright, open feeling to attract customers in their teens or 20s. At the same time, it allowed people to peek in from the outside. That was exactly why I had chosen this particular Noribang. I was waiting for the writer from the broadcasting studio. She was no doubt already up to her neck in preparations for the upcoming show, and if she had to go out and recruit a non-trainee contestant, chances were she'd check out places that were near her workplace. Hence, this Noribang was the best choice. Without hesitation, I threw 10 songs into the queue, and after skipping the intro, I began singing. It didn't take long for me to complete my first mission, sing 10 songs. I had known I'd be able to finish it quickly since it was the easiest of the missions given to me. I used the points to level up my singing, just as I'd done before, changing my level from C+ to B-. I wanted to test how the system worked again, so I sang the same song again and it seemed my abilities had improved. My vocal tone grew lusher and my voice became stronger. I guess this was the level of improvement I could expect each time I moved up a grade. At this rate, I'd be able to enhance my stats crazy fast. But there was something else I had to focus on first. This is my business card. I didn't expect her to take the bait so quickly. I thought I had started hanging around a little too early, but I'd unexpectedly hit the timing jackpot. I took the business card offered by the woman in glasses. She looked exhausted, but she was clearly trying to project a cheerful image. No doubt she was trying to leave a good first impression, meaning I had probably successfully caught her attention. The business card held the name I'd been hoping to see. Ryu Siren. The classmate who had been majoring in media communications was Ryu Seojin. No matter how you look at it, they're definitely siblings. "Excuse me, what's your name?" she asked. "Park Moon-dae. Your name is quite unique. I want you to consider what I'm about to say very carefully. I think you have what it takes to be a star. Our show is famous for scouting people who are celebrity material." Thank you. I didn't want to overreact. If I was too enthusiastic, it might reveal that I'd intentionally aimed for this exact situation. I was sure she wanted to avoid recruiting anyone who knew what they were doing. Not that it really mattered in my case. If someone had received training, it would come out in their initial screening. My laid-back attitude seemed to work for me though, because she quickly added, "Look, kid, you're pretty good looking and you sing well. I think you'll do really well on our show. Would you like to come with me now and do a screen test?" I'm sorry. She seemed determined to go forward with casting me since she was now being so direct. That's right. Why don't you call your parents? Tell them that you've been scouted for a TV show. They'll be so proud of you. I don't have any parents. As soon as I said that, her eyes sparkled with renewed interest. She probably immediately saw the potential flavor my spicy backstory could bring to the show. I couldn't deny that storytelling was an essential part of survival audition shows. In fact, using my family situation could work to my advantage, since viewers would no doubt criticize the show for milking my sad history. It'd be a waste not to use such a heart-wrenching story, since there was nothing I could do to change the past anyway. It didn't take the writer long to conceal those thoughts from her expression. She spoke more gently and sympathetically. "Oh, my. I'm so sorry. That was very insensitive of me. It's fine. I just wanted you to feel more comfortable about coming to the broadcasting station with me. It's not every day an opportunity like this comes along. Is it time to start giving in?" I paused, pretending to hesitate, and then slowly nodded. The woman beamed. "Oh, you made the right choice. The broadcasting station is right around the corner." Like that, I achieved my first goal. Things were proceeding much more smoothly than I had expected. When the writer practically dragged me to the broadcasting station, I thought she had a lot planned for me. I ended up barely doing anything. She simply had me sit down in front of a camera and do a simple interview. The production team didn't even ask me to perform a short dance, not even for formality's sake. And of course, they didn't advise me to take dance lessons either. This was all just more proof that the role I was expected to play was set in stone already. Well, it's a good thing none of that really matters. The only thing that mattered was that my name was now on the list of contestants. There was, however, one thing I hadn't anticipated. The first day of shooting was much sooner than I had anticipated. It's in 10 days? That's right. You're actually joining us at the very last minute. It's actually very rare that we allow contestants to join so late, so I'd say that you're quite lucky. I think it's a sign of just how well suited you are for the position. What a nice way of saying I'm just cannon fodder. I thought somewhat bitterly, feeling a little flustered by her words despite myself. I suppose it didn't hurt them to be nice about it, since it didn't cost anything to be kind. Of course, as soon as they realize I have nothing to offer them, they'll toss me aside. I couldn't think of another industry that cut ties as fast as this one. Also, expecting someone straight off the street to prepare an audition song and be ready to start filming within 10 days was simply ridiculous. They acted like none of their requests were a big deal, but if I was a contestant signed with an agency, there would have been some complaints. They didn't give a crap about whether I had a backing track or an instrumental. They just expected me to give a horrible performance and be hated on by the viewers at home. And if the judges didn't curse me out, I'd just be edited out completely. It didn't matter though, because I had expected this to happen. I see. Thank you. I nodded as if I didn't suspect a thing, projecting the image that I was nervous about filming since it was just around the corner. Satisfaction flashed across the writer's face before she could contain it. We're the ones who should be thanking you. Anyway, I'll send the rest of the details you'll need later. I was being dismissed and I didn't hesitate to leave the broadcasting station behind, already mentally sketching out my plans for the next 10 days. Since there was very little time left, I would have to resort to some extreme methods. An extremely busy 10 days passed, and before long it was already the day of the first shoot. Like most other survival audition shows, the first evaluations were of the contestants' individual performances, and so began the first round of screening. Anyone familiar with idol survival shows would already know this, but it's not uncommon that a contestant's first impression would follow them until the end of the show. The worst thing anyone who lacked a special talent could do would be to give a merely satisfactory performance. It would be much better to completely fail and make a fool of yourself. Depending on the editing, they may use that initial failure to weave a narrative showing how much you've grown throughout the show. However, if I failed to make any impression at all on the judges and got edited out completely, my situation would be bleak. Of course, that didn't mean I was hoping for the viewers to hate me. Everyone remembers their numbers, right? Contestants will be called in order by number. When you are called, please come out into the hallway. The shoot had begun with a staged scene featuring each of the contestants walking down the hallway one by one. The clip was only going to be used in a 40-second teaser promo, but we'd already been filming for over 2 hours. This was understandable though, since there were 77 contestants in total, everyone so young. Seeing the faces of the contestants as they sat scattered around the backstage waiting room, my enthusiasm faded a little. No matter how much I told myself I was a time traveler with a status window only I could see, I slowly began to feel embarrassed, sitting amongst all these young kids and trying to become an idol. Excuse me, hi. One of the contestants, who had been striking up conversations here and there, approached me. I wasn't sure if he was just really excited, or if he was trying to get on people's good sides. It was worth noting that he looked young enough to be in middle school. I couldn't believe I was about to introduce myself to a middle school kid to build connections, especially at my age. Did you apply on your own? Yes. Oh, cool. So did I. By the way, may I ask how old you are? I'm 20. It felt weird lying about my age by 9 years, but it also felt a little good. Are you with an agency? Nope. Oh, I see. A lot of the contestants from the previous seasons of Idol Incorporated left their agencies before coming on the show. So were you with one before? No, I've never been signed with an agency. Oh, I see. And with that, the middle school brat instantly lost interest in me. He quickly ended our conversation and went off to find someone else to talk to. Seeing as he already seemed to have a good understanding of the way the industry worked, he had the potential to go far. Of course, he'd have to conceal that calculative mind from the cameras first, but that was none of my business. In any case, my encounter with the middle school kid proved one thing: the competition was bloodthirsty. I wondered if my judgment had been impaired after getting caught up in this bizarre situation. Choosing to come on this show might have been a mistake. Well, there was no use crying over spilled milk. All right, everyone, let's move to the set. They were finally starting to film the actual show. I followed the crowd of middle schoolers huddled together like a gang of meerkats, and waited for my turn beside the main stage, where the initial screening was being held. My name was called somewhere around the middle. Contestant Lee Sejin B, you've ranked 15th place. Please take a seat over there. Thank you. One of the contestants bowed his head upon hearing the MC's words. He was one of the 4 contestants that were being evaluated together since they were all from the same agency. Even though he was the best of the 4, the production team didn't look pleased. He's too over the top, thought writer Ryu Siren, scowling as she twirled her pen. The funding for Season 3 was comparatively less than that of previous seasons. This was to be expected since Season 3 had barely been allowed to air after the colossal failure that was Season 2. Going so far as to adopt the absurd subtitle, Realist, the production team had fought tooth and nail to redeem themselves from the disgrace that was the previous season. However, no matter how hard they had tried to bolster the show through personal connections and planning, there were some things they couldn't do anything about, and one of those things was the talent pool available to them. Most candidates who had received adequate training had already joined other audition shows. Idol Incorporated needed 77 contestants in total, and to fill that quota the show had ended up with a large number of trainees that were lacking in actual talent. If there were way too many incompetent contestants, the magic of editing could only do so much to make the show entertaining. Besides, when it came to Korean audition shows, helping an inept contestant to gain popularity was an impossible task. If you tried to cover up a contestant's lack of skills, one small mistake and the show would drown under an endless wave of criticism. Quoting controversy was honestly a good thing in their field, but the trick was to avoid keywords like boring and fraudulent. Their one reassurance was that Idol Incorporated had managed to secure all the top-tier contestants they had been hoping to recruit. Still, it was difficult to film the show without a dark horse contestant. This kid is a prime example of the problem. The contestant coming on stage was a complete amateur who had been added to the show just 10 days before the first shoot. Siren had little hope for him since he had been recruited to replace one of the contestants who had been disqualified for drunk driving days before the shoot. What was his name again? I suppose he'll introduce himself when the judging begins. The contestant had a moderately good voice and wasn't that bad looking either. He also had a backstory that would make good TV if they needed it. Because of that, he had surpassed Siren's relatively low standards, which had been made that way by urgent circumstances. But even with all those merits combined, he was still only barely better than a random nobody off the street. Well, I suppose we could compare the other contestants to him. The other judges already appeared uninterested and were chatting with each other after skimming through his application form, in which nothing stood out, particularly except for his family history. Siren thought to herself, I actually hope that he makes a complete fool of himself. That way, the audience will get fired up. The viewers would get bored if they continued to only see mediocre contestants. but if several of them were to do ridiculously badly, it would make the show more entertaining. That's why people often said all publicity was good publicity. Since this contestant was a non-trainee who had prepared his performance by himself in just 10 days, there was a good chance he'd do so badly that it was funny. Siren glanced at the stage, her expectations low. Next contestant, please come up to the stage. The amateur contestant made his way up the steps to stand before the judges. Thankfully, it seemed as if he'd managed to find a decent hair salon to style his hair because he was looking better than the last time she'd seen him. The problem was that he had a particular aura about him that suggested he was either bored or melancholy. When I first saw him, I thought it was because we talked about his family background. I can't believe he still exudes that energy even with all these cameras on him. In actuality, the only reason he seemed so unbothered was because he was used to seeing swarms of cameras from his days working as a paparazzo. However, Siren, who had no way of knowing this, found him a little odd. Is he the stoic type who doesn't show his nerves? Not that it mattered. All she had to do was to present him as incompetent, yet arrogant. Siren contemplated her plans for him with renewed enthusiasm. Upon arriving on stage, the young man listened to the MC politely. Yes, so, could you please introduce yourself? I'm Park Moon-dae. Pleased to meet you. And with that, he bowed his head. The judges snorted to themselves quietly. Wait, is that it? Asked one of the male judges, chuckling into the microphone in his hand. He had asked the question with a slight sneer. What the judge meant was that he expected him to introduce himself with more detail, but Park Moon-dae only nodded sincerely. Yes, I don't have any other experience in this field that is worth talking about. The judges burst into laughter. Geez, this one's really something. Hilarious. Several of the judges whispered softly while making sure everything they said was picked up by the microphone. Oh, looking at his application form, he really doesn't have any experience. Indeed, normally, this was about the time the judges would ask something like, so why did you decide to join this competition? But they must have all thought it would be more dramatic if they asked after his performance, so no such question came, which made Siren think that maybe something usable might come from this audition after all. Well, then, let's see what you've got. All right. With the malicious glee of a vulture circling its prey, everyone watched the contestant as he took the microphone handed to him by the staff. Soon, the intro of the song started playing, only for everyone to be immediately surprised by the familiar beat. Why would he pick this song? Several of the judges began whispering to one another. T-Holic? T-Holic had been a hugely popular male idol group that won the Artist of the Year award for 3 consecutive years. They had been inactive for several years because many of the members were completing their compulsory military service. Instead of waiting for everyone to come back, the agency had promoted the youngest member's solo career since he had yet to enlist. He'd released a mini-album with a title track that boasted an addictive chorus. After some time, people began to realize that the true value of the album lay in its B-side track, Party in Me. To everyone's surprise, it even climbed up the music charts and made it into the top 3. A popular female artist had recommended the song on her social media, then it was used on several entertainment shows, kickstarting the song's wave of popularity. With rich band instrumentals and a stylish synthesizer tune that paired well together, the song was pleasant to listen to and was frequently covered at college festivals. In the end, it managed to make the top 100 songs list for the year. And without a doubt, the instrumental coming from the speakers on stage at that moment was that song. The iconic intro was accompanied by a unique accordion melody. Of course, the song was considered to be a masterpiece. It would certainly help the contestant stand out if he sang it well, but that was what made the song choice even more strange. Many would wonder, is it possible for an ordinary person with absolutely zero experience in this field to sing this song? The song was a risky choice. It was neither a major hit song from a popular idol group nor a classic piece sung by an established artist. It just wasn't the song that would typically come to mind for an initial audition, regardless of whether it was an idol survival or singer survival audition. In both cases, it was a jarring song choice, especially since several years had passed since the song had first gained popularity. Siren hadn't bothered assigning him a song because she had assumed he'd give a pretty predictable performance, which was how she'd found herself in this unexpected situation. It went without saying that the production team should have checked the contestant's song selection beforehand, but there were 77 entrants in total, and the staff hadn't bothered wasting any of their precious time on a mere substitute. Now, they were facing the consequences of that. It will be hard to compare him to any of the others with this song. Siren tapped the table with her pen irritably. Initially shocked by the contestant's song selection, the judges were now waiting for the intro to end with a slightly apathetic air. Finally, Park Moon-dae began to sing. I remember who I've always been, not just in the shining and dazzling seasons, but also all the times I felt weary and weak at the end of these endless days. The one who'll embrace my broken self will always be me. Yeah, it's me. He was good. The song began on an offbeat, but he came in at the correct time and then flawlessly sang the first verse in a soft voice. Not many people would notice because he sang with such ease, but the song had a very tricky beat. It was the type of song that could easily reveal that the singer was an amateur, but the contestant was able to hit every note no matter how complex the beat was. Daden. One of the judges, who had been unconsciously tapping his finger to the beat, jolted with surprise at Mundi's perfect rhythm. The general audience wouldn't hear the intricacies of the beats, but would be left with the impression that he sang well since his notes were timed perfectly with the instrumental. Besides, his vocalization is pretty good. It was actually incredible. It wasn't that he was loud. The way his mellow tone resounded made it sound like it was almost three-dimensional. Did he sing this well at the Noribang? Siren tried to recall how he'd sounded on the day she had first met him, but he couldn't have been this good. If he had been, she would definitely have filmed a longer interview with him and even helped with his song selection. Did he improve this much in just 10 days? Oblivious to her shock, Park Moon-dae continued singing, moving from the first verse into the pre-chorus. That's why I must commemorate myself so that I won't ever forget again. Yes, remember, until this very moment, even when the notes climbed like a bird in flight, he didn't produce a single flat note. Nor was his breathing unnatural. At this point, something else caught Siren's attention. The judges' shocked expressions. I've managed to live through another day. That itself is a wondrous miracle. Don't forget it. Don't erase it. So remember and celebrate this moment. That's the party in me, as if every day is a party. Let's party. He hit the high notes perfectly and with ease. It was as if he could go an octave higher if he wanted. His voice sounded so effortless and crystal clear. Rather than yelling, the method required was that the singer delivered the song as if speaking softly and beautifully. Siren felt like laughing in disbelief. Okay, this is actually great. He's certainly main vocalist material. I mean, we were lacking vocalists, so hasn't this turned out perfectly? I have a good eye. Who knew I'd find such a gem recruiting a random guy off the street? The song proceeded to the second verse. While the melody was the same as the first, the rhythm was much more complex. Moon-dae pulled it off as easily as breathing. His voice didn't fail even once as he moved into the bridge and toward the final chorus. The way he hit the high notes sent chills down everyone's spines. He didn't exaggerate but didn't sound careless either. It was, in a word, a superb climax. He returned to the first line of the song like he was finishing a conversation, and with that, the performance came to an end. I remember who I've always been. Moon-dae maintained a nice tone until the final note. As soon as the instrumental ended, he bowed and said in a dazed manner, "Thank you for listening." There was a brief moment of silence. Siren gripped her pen and thought, okay, we're keeping this one. As she mentally readjusted Mundi's role in the show, the judges picked up their microphones with great enthusiasm. Wow, Moon-dae. Yes, you know you're amazing, right? I practiced hard so I could give a good performance. One of the judges interrupted. No, I'm telling you, this is something you're born with. You've got talent. He was a choreographer infamous for his blunt attitude. Anyone could tell he liked what he'd heard, based on the way he was grinning from ear to ear. There was a chance that he was exaggerating, but he wasn't the type to say anything he didn't mean. Screaming with joy on the inside, Moon-dae bowed appreciatively as the judges continued to give positive feedback. Muti, a female singer who was starring as a vocal coach, seemed especially impressed and showered him with praise. First of all, I'd like to say that your tone is very refreshing. You can hear that very clearly since your vocalization is so good. I know, right? It almost felt like he was whispering right in my ear. True, true. The others all expressed their agreement eagerly. Muti nodded, adding, also, your voice seems like it would suit many genres that are really important for an idol. You also don't seem to have developed any bad singing habits, so I'm very much looking forward to your future performances. I mean it. Thank you. Moon-dae, you've never worked with an agency before, right? Earlier, you mentioned that you have no experience in this field, and looking at your application form, that's certainly true. No, not yet. At this, a young male judge cut in. He was a popular idol whose group had lost 2 members recently because they had chosen not to renew their contracts with his company. Does that mean you've never taken any lessons before? Yes, that's correct. Nothing at all? Not even after school lessons? Park Moon-dae nodded silently, and the judge seemed impressed by this answer, if slightly skeptical. Beaming, Muti spoke again. Yeah, it might be better for you to wait for your big break rather than signing a contract with just any random agency at this point. I'm sure you'll be able to secure a good deal. Thank you for your kind words. Siren suddenly remembered that Muti's agency was preparing to launch a new boy group soon. That's right, Muti owns shares in her agency. Glancing at the contestant who was bowing his head politely, Siren noted he didn't seem all that impressed. When she looked back at the judges who were showering him with praise, she suddenly had a strange feeling. She felt like they had fallen into a trap. Discovering a talented contestant was a win for the show, but for some reason, she felt unsettled. Resting her chin on her hand, Siren stared at the microphone Moon-dae was holding, and was suddenly hit with a realization: he didn't do a proper dance. Of course, he had performed a few moves that resembled dancing, but since the song itself wasn't produced for being performed on stage, the moves were very simple and couldn't be called choreography. Ordinarily, the backup dancers would give a legit performance, and the actual idol would just move their hands and feet according to the rhythm while singing, but anyone who watched his performance would remember the song's official choreography. So despite the contestants' lackluster dance moves, the viewers wouldn't think twice because the original performance was like that as well. This was especially true since his singing was so good. Besides, no one could deny the song belonged to a top-tier idol. By choosing this song, Moon-dae was able to be considered for his singing abilities alone and avoid being questioned about whether he was serious about being an idol. Ultimately, this was the best song Park Moon-dae could have chosen in his situation. This goes beyond just having good sense. It almost feels crafty. Feeling somehow deceived, Siren studied Moon-dae with a dissatisfied expression. As if reading Siren's mind, one of the judges, who had been sitting quietly until then, picked up her microphone. Her name was Youngrin, and she was from a girl group called Saintyu, which had gained overnight fame after someone uploaded a fan cam of them performing acrobatics in the rain while smiling. The dance you just showed us barely passed for choreography. Can you perform something else that shows your dance skills better? Siren very nearly clapped with glee. I did it. It was worth singing the song over and over for the past few days until I'd gotten sick of it, because in doing so I had majorly leveled up. After transferring all my points to singing, my level for that category rose to a dash. It was the obvious choice. You had to sing well to succeed as an artist in Korea. This held true whether you were an idol or an ordinary singer. If you couldn't dance, that could always be fixed with intense practice. But if you couldn't sing, not even a pre-recorded track would save you on stage. Also, when it came to idol trainees, there were always fewer people pursuing the position of the main vocalist compared to the position of the main dancer. If you were able to establish yourself as the main vocalist early on, you had a better chance of securing a spot in the debut group. The next important step had been choosing the right song for the evaluation. Seeing as I had barely received any negative feedback, it seemed as if I had chosen the correct strategy. I had predicted what criticism I was likely to receive from the judges based on my weaknesses and avoided any song which might summon those negative comments. What's wrong with your dancing? I deleted any songs that had hardcore choreography from my list. Why aren't you dancing at all? I took out any slow love songs, too. You sing well, but I'm not getting any idol vibes. I excluded all songs that weren't originally performed by idol groups. I must say that you were overly ambitious trying to perform this song all on your own. Since I didn't know how to rearrange songs, I avoided taking any risks and stayed away from all songs that were sung by more than 3 people. To be frank, I'd rather listen to the original artist's version. I eliminated all songs that had been released within the last 3 years. Then from the songs that were left, I chose one that ranked high on the music charts. Thinking about it again, it was definitely a good strategy. I thought I'd be able to pass the first round without incident, but of course, there was always at least one person who wasn't swept up in the atmosphere. I made eye contact with the judge holding the microphone. It was a face I recognized. She was the idol who made me realize I could earn money taking pictures of idols. Thanks to her, I was able to earn enough to pay tuition for the second semester of my freshman year. It was a win-win for both of us since she became famously known as a hard-working idol thanks to the video I took of her doing acrobatics in the rain. Unfortunately this time, it didn't seem like we'd be benefiting each other in any way. I understand that you've never received training before, but since this is the first round of auditions, we still need to know whether you have the basics down or not. I'm sure you must have come prepared with at least one song. It'd be crazy if I said I hadn't prepared anything. In fact, it would be worse than keeping my mouth shut. Yes, is it possible for me to do this song? One of the crew hurriedly approached the stage and gestured me over. I told him the name of the song I had in mind. The camera followed us and filmed the moment the staff jolted, surprised. Seeing this, I was sure I'd avoided ending up on the cutting room floor. My efforts had paid off. The studio was then filled with a rhythmic melody. The intro to the wildly famous song was followed by the sprightly voice of the vocalist. As I struck the iconic starting pose that I still somehow remembered, one of the judges spat out the water he was drinking. Oh, same here. I've got a crush on you. Too, my heart keeps racing, I feel like popcorn. Pop, pop. The popping beat resonates, my heart feels like it's gonna explode. The only person who was bopping her head along to my simple steps and watching attentively was Youngrin, the judge who had asked to see me dance. It seemed like she was the only judge capable of keeping a straight face, especially during the part of the song that half of all people my age could dance from memory. Pop, pop, you're my popcorn, oh yeah. You control control my heart. The chorus of Marshmallows, POPCON, which had been released 10 years ago, exploded from the sound system and rang in my ears. Infamous for being one of those songs you should never listen to while studying for the CSAT exam, POPCON made numerous students fail their listening tests after getting its bizarre lyrics and addictive melody stuck in their heads. For the record, I had been one of their victims, but couldn't retake the test because I didn't have the money to do so. Pop, pop, popping popcorn, oh. The song was so popular that lots of people made dance covers and uploaded them online. That was how simple the choreography was. If I was being perfectly honest, even elementary school kids could easily pick it up with a little practice. If I had performed this 10 years ago when the song was still popular, the judges would have roasted me alive. However, I chose the song because I thought I could evoke a feeling of nostalgia and the judges would hopefully consider it a funny song choice. It went without saying that I was dancing as best I could with a totally straight face. Even if others found my performance funny, it would raise eyebrows if I gave them the impression I wasn't taking it seriously. I needed to communicate to them that I had worked hard to prepare the dance to the best of my abilities. As a matter of fact, I had worked very hard on it. Through repeated practice, I leveled up and completed the first movement and 10 movements missions. It seemed like I had made a few mistakes since some of the judges were laughing hysterically, but whatever. They'd evaluate me however they wanted. It was beyond my control now. I completed the choreography up until the final pose of the first verse. Hanging my head, I heaved as I tried to catch my breath. The sound of applause brought me back to reality. Thank you, I said. Although Youngrin grabbed the microphone first, the choreographer guy was the first to speak. I noticed that his eyes were red, most likely from laughing so hard he'd cried. Oh wow, sheesh. That was the last song I expected to hear. Moonday, weren't you like 10 years old when POPCON came out? Did you perform that for a talent show as a kid or something? No, nothing like that. I chose this song because I'm a huge fan of Marshmello. This response made the judges laugh even harder. The last album that Marshmello released came out 4 years ago. Since the peak of their popularity had been so long ago, it was a very peculiar thing to hear a 20-year-old declare that he was a big fan of them. The age gap was so huge that it wouldn't do anything to damage my prospects as an idol. Normally it was the first rule of being an idol that you never expressed any interest in the opposite sex. Sure enough, the choreographer guffawed once more. Next to him, Muti muttered to herself fondly, "That's cute. He did his best. I'll give him that." The male idol judge said, weighing in. It seemed that any suspicions he'd had that I was lying about my lack of experience had completely disappeared. Finally, Youngrin spoke. "This doesn't mean you did well." I had a feeling she'd say that. This was the moment when the editors would cut to a close-up and include some dramatic sound effects. They'd also probably add a huge red caption of what she'd just said, repeated 3 times, with a "done" sound. Imagining how the show would be edited here, I waited patiently for her to finish speaking. First of all, I can tell from the way you move your body that you're not very skilled at dancing. Even if you receive a positive evaluation now for creating a good atmosphere in the studio, you have to understand that future missions will be very challenging. I will be prepared. I meant the status window would be prepared, not me. All right. Youngrin seemed like she had more she wanted to say, but she settled for just nodding gravely. Finally, she smiled slightly and said, "In any case, I can see that you worked hard. Well done. Thank you." I felt like I had said that at least 10 times today. Is it always going to be like this? As I thought to myself, the judges put down their microphones so their voices were inaudible to the contestants, and started discussing amongst themselves. Now, the program's next cruel twist was about to be introduced. From the first round, the contestants were to be ranked from 1st to 77th place and seated accordingly. The contestants would immediately go to their assigned seats after the judges gave their evaluations, even though they were only temporary rankings. If a seat was filled but the next contestant performed better, everyone would move down a rank and yield their seat. One of the show's selling points was the frequent shots of the lowest-ranking contestant moving to their new rank in tiers. Fortunately, it didn't seem as though that would be my fate. I guessed I'd rank at about 24th place. Park Moon-dae ranks 17th. They had no doubt purposely seated me about 5 ranks higher so they could film some shots where I moved down in rank, which meant that my actual rank was closer to what I had predicted. I have a feeling my rank went up by 4 or 5 places just because I made everyone laugh. It was likely that given time, as the judges became more objective, I'd have to give up my spot to the middle and high school kids auditioning after me. I found it kind of amusing that I was bowing my head gratefully when in reality I was dissatisfied. "Thank you. I'll put you through some hardcore training, so you can get a better ranking next time," said the choreographer with a grin. His friendly demeanor would change the moment I didn't improve, so I was glad I had the status window. Hopefully, I can create a scenario in the future where the choreographer is moved by my progress. I bowed once again and headed to the set where all the seats were arranged. They were each labeled with a number, and the higher the rank, the more luxurious and comfortable the seats were. The difference was glaring. My seat at 17th place was a leather chair like the kind you might find in a corporate executive's office. After sitting down, the contestant across from me who ranked 15th approached me to say hello. He had a friendly demeanor and seemed to be around Mundy's age. "Hi," he said. "Hey," I replied. "Your singing was amazing. Thank you. I'm sure you did great as well." "I'm sorry. Hahaha. I meant to say I couldn't be sure since I didn't see his performance, but judging from his ranking, he probably did." And thankfully, he didn't seem to take my words the wrong way. He just laughed loudly and pointed at the name tag on his chest. "I'm Lee Sejin." Hearing his name, I almost groaned out loud but tried to keep my face neutral as I replied, "I'm Park Moon-dae. Nice to meet you." "Same here." Bringing the conversation to an end as naturally as possible, I turned to look at the stage just in time to see the next contestant come on stage. However, all I could think about was the name I had just heard. Lee Sejin. That was the name of one of the contestants who had successfully debuted through the show. You could say I'd just met someone who was destined to emerge victorious from the show. There was one problem, though. A year after the show ended, he was involved in a drug scandal. Worse, he was responsible for distributing. I was pretty sure I had seen his name on the 9 o'clock evening news while eating at a soup joint near my studio apartment. Lee Sejin from Idol Incorporated, arrested on suspicion of distributing drugs. Let's not talk to him again. The earlier I cut ties with him, the better. All right, I should use this time to check my status window. Name, Park Moon-dae, Ryu Gunwoo, Level 5 Title, None Singing, Dancing, D Physical Attractiveness, C+ Charm, C Trait, Infinite Potential Status Abnormality, Debut or Die. Points remaining. 1. I must have received a point after leveling up just now, most likely because I'd completed the first performance mission. I'd also been assigned stats for dancing and charm. Both traits hadn't been assigned any grade yet when I was practicing. Did that mean I could only receive points from official performances? I wasn't sure what the exact requirements were yet. In any case, just as I had assumed while practicing, this Park Moon-dae really had no talent in dancing, even though he possessed a passable charm. Couldn't any average person manage AD for dancing? I concluded that I'd have to invest points in dancing 2 or 3 times if I wanted to be able to get anywhere at all. On the other hand, the physical attractiveness stat gave me hope. Although I hadn't used any points on that category, The level had gone up since I'd been taking care of my looks. This meant that I could increase my stats without having to use the level up feature in the status window all the time. It was promising news. There was another pop-up, however, which was quite peculiar. It was a small one that appeared next to the status window. A successful performance. You've impressed the majority of the audience. Pick your general trait. Click. Something weird is happening again. Still, seeing words like success and impressed, I had a good feeling this was going to be a reward. I pretended to scratch my head and subtly pressed the button. Upon doing so, something interesting appeared. It was a picture of a gray slot machine. The images in the slot were already spinning round and round beside the lever that had been pulled down. It gradually slowed to the point that I was able to make out a few of the inscriptions on the slots. Several of them were colored yellowish copper, while most were just gray. Stout-hearted, eraser for embarrassing moments, crocodile tears, sleep is for the dead, look at me. I mean, it's nice that I can guess what each trait is for from the slogans, but aren't they a little cheesy? No longer so enthusiastic. I watched the slot machine closely since it would stop soon anyway. With several dramatic poof sounds, pieces of confetti exploded from the slot machine. It finally stopped on a yellowish copper slot. Trait, sleep is for the dead, D, obtained. When activated, you will not feel tired even without having slept. Comes with an additional 30% increase in the rate of acquiring experience points from 0:01 a.m. to 4 a.m. lasts for 1 week, single use only. This would absolutely come in handy in the future. The name is still so cheesy. In any case, it was literally a random prize system, an essential feature of any luck-based, doomed-to-fail game. Things were getting fun. I noticed that, at the very bottom of my status window, sleep is for the dead, deactivated, had been added to the trait category. I'd have to consider carefully when the best time to use it would be. Contestant Kong Minjo ranks 56th place. The evaluations continued, and aside from the potential druggie next to me, I hadn't seen any more of the winning members yet. I watched the next contestant come on stage. He had long limbs and a slender build. He was alone, so I could tell he didn't have connections with any of the other trainees. The contestants already seated by their rank started whispering to one another. It wasn't because he came on stage alone. Oh, wow, that's insane. It was because he was super good looking. I could hear the judges openly reacting loudly from below the ranked seating set. He's got such big, beautiful eyes, like a deer. Even I could tell that, based on looks alone, this guy didn't have to worry about not being able to debut. Frankly, he needn't have bothered going on a survival show. I'm pretty sure he had a future in the entertainment biz no matter what. However, the name on his tag wasn't one that I recognized. Cian Ian, if he hadn't been able to debut despite being so good looking, he must be incredibly untalented. He was more handsome than most of the idols I took fan cams of. If he has a status window like me, all his stats excluding physical attractiveness would have to be between D and F. If only I could see other people's stats, I'd know for sure. Much to my surprise, the moment I had that thought, a window appeared next to the contestant, so I could see other people's stats, too. Name, Cian Ian, singing, B, A, dancing, A, EX, physical attractiveness, A+, S+, charm, B, A+, trait, fortitude, deactivated, status abnormality, lack of self-esteem. Those were some impressive stats. With those grades, it'd be a breeze for him to rank within the top 10 in this round. Did the letters inside the parentheses indicate his maximum potential? That meant he had a promising future ahead of him. However, it was the last category that stood out to me the most. Status abnormality, lack of self-esteem, seriously, with those looks? It'd make more sense if his status abnormality was arrogance. Regardless, it was a huge advantage to be able to check the other contestants' stats. If things didn't work out, I might even be able to make a living working at an entertainment agency as a casting manager. As I read each category curiously, I heard the MC's voice. All right, could you please introduce yourself? Cian Ian picked up the microphone with trembling hands. Hello. The kid wasn't stuttering merely from stage fright. His speech pattern was awkward, and it was obvious something more was wrong. He was showing clear symptoms of a speech disorder. I could also tell that he was very self-conscious about his stutter. He was exuding anxiety and embarrassment. That explains it. I immediately understood Cian Ian's stats better. But with his good looks and talent, The production team could have made a dramatic, moving story about his speech disorder. So why wasn't he able to debut in my previous life? Is it because of the lack of self-esteem, status abnormality? I wonder if I can find out more. Lack of self-esteem, despises himself. All stats decrease by 2 levels. Another window had popped up. I didn't expect to be given more details after only thinking about it. How useful. Maybe I should check my own status abnormality to see how many days I have left to live. I was being sarcastic, but to be honest, I was honestly shocked that his status abnormality was so harsh. If I had gotten his debuff while gaming, would have just called it quits. Frustratingly for the poor guy, this was real life, which meant there were no resets. Ian, do you perhaps have trouble speaking? I got into an accident when I was young, and so began the telling of his sad backstory. More accurately, Ian attempted to explain to the judges about his condition, while the production team tried their best to turn it into an emotional moment. The contestants around me began to deliver contrived reactions as well. One of them, who looked particularly emotional, tears already gathering in his eyes, was sure to be used by the production team as a reaction shot. He was even delivering a line, "That's so sad." Such an overreaction could read as inappropriate when it came to sensitive topics like this, though. If the editors didn't incorporate his response carefully, he'd receive backlash from the viewers for being insensitive. I stared straight ahead without any change in my expression. After saying a few empty words of encouragement, the judges gently asked him to perform. "Well then, Ian, let's see what you have for us." Oh okay, his performance wasn't that bad. Overall, it was a stage the judges would see favorably overall. Once again, the information in the status window was correct. His performance was weaker than his actual abilities. Ian ranks 18th place. This is what happened when you didn't have a steady mindset and a good strategy. It was hard to believe that he ranked lower than me with those stats. The judges' evaluation was good overall. Either the judges thought he was talented, or they just didn't want to voice any negative remarks. Good job. We look forward to your next performance. The judges each offered a heartwarming compliment or two. One of them even gave the kids a thumbs up, but Ian looked dejected, and just hung his head in disappointment. Trying his best to smile, he stepped down from the stage and was led by the MC to sit next to me. Should I say hi? Ian glanced at me but didn't say anything. I didn't want to make it seem like I was snubbing him, but it was also too much of a hassle to strike up a conversation. When I nodded to him in greeting, the kid jolted in surprise and nodded awkwardly several times. Next up, we have 5 contestants who'll be evaluated at the same time. Choi Jin-soo, Hong Sung. As I counted the remaining contestants in my head, I sighed softly. We still have a long way to go.